housekeeping and arranging all the link ups with YouTube, etc. And hope you're all well. Just hang on to turn the volume down because that will echo. And basically, if you see this on YouTube, which you can find under my name, Paul Bergin, Paulburgin, you're welcome to add any comments on the YouTube page. I will share that shortly on, yeah. But otherwise, all good. Hang on. Oh. Okay. Here we go. And just signing in here. And there's only one person watching, which is clearly me. I'll just add this onto here. And also, but if you can also go to my blog, which is at http. Well, no, let's go www.paulburgin.blogspot.com, and you can take part in the discussion there. Either way, or and leave. I leave comments, and if you do choose to leave any comments, please don't hesitate to. And please don't hesitate to do so. We will try and add them into the conversation. Sorry about, just trying to sort out 1, 2 things at once. And hopefully, okay. So is Andrew reading it? No, and bear with me. Trying to do 3 things at once here. And so I do apologize for, but basically, long and short of it is this. I'm just doing some general housekeeping at the moment, making sure people have ready access to seeing this on YouTube, if not on YouTube, on my blog. And either if you're on my blog, which is www.paulburgin.blogspot.com, or my YouTube page, which you can find in my name, and you can find links to those on my Twitter and Facebook pages. Please don't hesitate to leave comments, and we'll try and incorporate them into the discussion. And Andrew is here, so I will let him into the room, and we'll go from there. Good morning, Andrew. Andrew is here, so I will. Oops! I need to turn something off. Hang on. There we go. There. Sorry about that. Some gremlins.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, all there. So I've just sorted that out. How are you this morning?
I'm good, thank you. You?
Yeah, fine. I seem to be almost on top of everything and not running ragged, which is unusual for me. But
it's called August.
Yes, I know. Anyway, so yes, the BBC, which has been much praised and much maligned over the decades, and not least over the last few years, Just in short, how do you see the BBC? Good and bad?
Well, that's a difficult question to open with, isn't it? I think I look at the BBC with rose-tinted spectacles to a certain extent. Certainly did in the past. The BBC that I remember as a child was a very trusted news organisation, full of highly respected journalists, and as I see, you trusted the BBC. You trusted everything that was being reported as being fair and impartial. It was also the home of some excellent comedy and entertainment shows. I mean, if I go back to my childhood, you could Saturday evenings were a joy to behold on both channels. You know, I say both because there were literally just two main channels at that point. It was BBC One or BBC. Oh, sorry, BBC One or ITV. Yes, there was BBC Two, and I'm talking about before Channel 4 even started. There was BBC.
Just quickly, on Saturday nights, were you a Muppet Show person or a Doctor Who person?
On a Saturday, I always remember the Muppet Show being on a Sunday night, actually.
Was it? Oh.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
I can just about remember the tail end of the Muppet Show, so the finite details are a bit beyond me. So, yeah, sorry,
there's all sorts of entertainment. I mean, I'm going back to sort of the days of sort of Morecambe and Wise, you know, and Tommy Cooper and the two Ronnies, and you know, there's some great entertainers. I mean, all of that has changed. I suppose all of that was bound to change with the advent not just of satellite television, but of course the internet and everything that we can stream. But when it comes to the bias in the BBC, I often use an example of Question Time. If you watch Question Time and then look at Twitter, you will see people from the left complaining it's biased to the right, and you will see people from the right saying it's biased to the left, and it's exactly the same program. So bias, to a certain extent, is in the eye of the beholder. But there is no doubt that a certain amount of bias does come through on BBC News. I mean, I'll give you two quick examples. I mean, one, I was asked a number of years ago to go onto BBC Radio Scotland to take part in the debate on the licence fee. And I said it was a Sunday morning programme. I said, fine. I said, when do you want me? There's already going to be enough guests in the studio, and what we'd like you to do is just to record something. So I had to go down to my local BBC radio station, record questions that they asked me, and then that went out on the Sunday morning. Obviously, edited highlights, as you would expect. Everyone else who was on the programme was in favour of the BBC licence fee. The only person who wasn't given the opportunity to have a live interview about it was me. Now, that is bias. It's not presenting the issue fairly and squarely. And another one happened on Newsnight quite a number of years ago, and they're discussing the minimum pricing of alcohol. And Emily Maitlis introduced this by saying, in favour of minimum pricing of alcohol, we have Sarah Wollaston, who is a Conservative MP for Totnes, former GP. Opposed to the minimum pricing of alcohol is Eric Joyce, a Labour MP who was arrested on the parliamentary estate for punching someone whilst drunk. Eric Joyce, why are you against the minimum pricing of alcohol? Now, it was obviously a setup. Now, if I'd been him, I wouldn't have even done it, because it was obviously a setup. But they deliberately chose that particular guest to frame it in a bad way, that this man has an alcohol problem, this man gets drunk. The whole point of minimum pricing of alcohol is that fewer people will get drunk. And that Sarah Wollaston, of course, is a really good person because she's a GP, she's a doctor, and she knows best. So therefore, we must go with her side of the argument. And it's obvious bias, and it just creeps in.
I mean, it does. I mean, I did warn you before we went ahead with this that this is one where we were almost singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yes.
I did think it was worth persevering with this one because I think some interesting points might come out of this. I used to be very, very defensive of the BBC because I saw the arguments through a left-right prism. And for an example, which you yourself gave, which was the left complain it's biased to the right, and the right complain it's biased to the left. So I was like a number of defenders of the BBC whose immediate response to that was, oh, it's all right then. But I do know there is a sort of metropolitan cultural bias within 7's news, but I think more to the point, I don't think it's really that it's difficult to explain. I don't think it's that deliberate. I don't
No,
really
no,
aware.
I don't either. I don't either. I think it's in the mindset, as you said. It's a metropolitan mindset that they have. They all went to sort of the same schools. So many of them were privately educated.
Yeah.
When you get to the top of the BBC, so many of them went to the same universities, usually Oxford, Cambridge, or to others like St Andrews, Durham, some University of London colleges. All very similar backgrounds, all live in sort of similar areas, and therefore all seem to have similar views. And it's a group think that's there, and I don't think it's particularly deliberate. I just think it's there.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say something a moment ago. The whole thing with the the bias and the fact that we're they don't seem aware of it. You do seem to. I don't think. Also, the tragedy is I don't think when they do have, say, discussions like you said, it's not so much whether there's a bias or setup. They don't get to the nub of the problem, whatever your viewpoint is. One of the things I dislike about Question Time is it compared to before, and I refuse to watch it unless there's something very specific on that particular time, like where there's something so particularly major in the news or so, any other reason, is it's become a bear pit. I remember, what was it, 2 years ago, Rachel and I were on holiday in Northern Ireland. And after a day when we visited Londonderry, where Rachel had her grandmother came from, or where grandmother lived, and and having this long drive across the province to County Down, where we were staying, and to sort of settle down to watch Question Time before going to bed. And I switched off after 15 minutes because it was just this huge, that no one listens to each other. It's a bear pit. And it's like it's almost like they're deliberately getting the most controversial panel member, or at least 2 or 3 controversial panel members. And the audiences it's like watching Twitter in 3D.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. It's not the program that it once was, and of course during the pandemic it changed completely, didn't it? I mean, they started going around different towns and cities and pick an audience from there, but then they ended up just with a panel of audience members, didn't they, for months? None of that was particularly ideal. So no, I do agree with you, and also I think the last thing that you want to do before you go to bed is to basically get yourself angry and sort of wake yourself up and get the adrenaline flowing. I'd rather watch a comedy show or something like that and have a good laugh and then fall asleep than watch politics till 11:30, 20 to midnight. And it seemed at one point it seemed to be getting later and later. That 10 o'clock news bulletin and then regional news bulletins pushed it to 10:35, 10:40, 10:45. And it's just all getting a little bit too late for me to watch that particular type of program. I'm regularly up till midnight, but I do like to relax.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you're thinking I've got to be up at, any time between 6 and 7:30 in the following morning, which a lot of us are, it's not really the kind of thing you want to go to. But the reason it used to be so different with Question Time. I mean, if you look to the early episodes, and it's only, I think, in the last decade. I mean, there was the occasional episode, but I mean, like in the one just after 9/11. But generally, it's only in the last few years it seems to be, a point. The reason I mention it is because I think aside from its deterioration, I wonder whether I can't work out whether part of it is the way whether society's changed, or whether they're trying to whip up controversy by the way it's structured and organized, the program, or whether it's a bit of both.
I think it is a bit of both. It's also with Twitter. I mean, when Twitter became really popular, which it has been about the last decade, it's been around for about 15 years now, but it's become really popular. in the last decade. That seems to have coincided, and I don't think it is a coincidence really, with the deterioration of Question Time. And then it's also to do with ratings. I think they want to have good ratings for the program, and if you can whip a little bit more controversy, get more controversial speakers on, have a good argument or a very ill-tempered argument usually, and then particularly between audience members, then perhaps more people would tune in. But I think maybe more people, well, no more people don't tune in. I think that's the problem. It has lost ratings. But I would dare say that it's probably lost even more of its loyal audience, people who have watched this. I mean, I first started watching Question Time when Robin Day was presenting it, back in the late 1980s. I've watched Question Time for a lot of years, over 30 years, but it's lost me now as a regular viewer. The only time I ever seem to watch it, yes, when there's a topic that may come up that really interests me. Generally, it's when I've got a friend on who's a panelist. And I tend to know at least one panelist every week anyway. When you work in politics, you do. But certainly, I do have occasional good friends who go on there, and I sort of watch them to give them my bit of support. And that's the only time I ever watch it.
Yeah, I mean, do you think this is? I mean, this part of it seems, I think, to do with the fact that some of the fact that there's more competition, so therefore there's more of an attempt to get people's attention. Because we do see this across the board. I mean, Newsnight, I remember a few years ago when Ian Katz took over, and I still like Newsnight, I still watch Newsnight, but one of my problems with Newsnight was it seemed to occasionally go into what I call this week gimmicks. Because some people watching this who are politicos might disagree with me, but if there was one political program I hated with a passion, it was This Week with Andrew Neil.
That's where we do disagree, because I used to love it.
Well, I'll tell you why I dislike it. I do think there's a market for light-hearted satire. I do think that political satire, particularly if it's on a Friday evening, I do like that. I do think there's a market for late night discussion programs. I just felt it was a bunch of politicos trying to do something like Have I Got News for You and be serious. It was almost like, the best way I can describe how it fitted in my mentality was seeing people dancing on the dance floor at a disco, fine. Seeing your parents at a meeting with people your age on the dance floor in the disco is a bit like head in hands. And that is how I'm not thinking my own parents, because I've been in that situation, but I know this sort of, how people say things. That is how I saw This Week in the political sphere.
I used to like it because it was like that. So sometimes I like things because they can be truly awful. Michael, the way Michael Portillo dresses normally is interesting to say the least, with these bright colours, but then put him with a glittery disco jacket on, trying to do. I just think it was rather amusing. I thought it was rather light-hearted, but I could understand why some people didn't like it though. And I've having followed you on Twitter for a lot of years, I knew exactly what you were going to say about This Week as soon as you opened your mouth, because you haven't kept those views to yourself, have you? So.
No, I will admit I did. I feel bad about this, because it's about the demise of a much loved TV program, but I did kind of cheer when I found it was going to end. But the reason I mention, again, going back to it, is the reason I felt it's because I felt occasionally Newsnight went into This Week gimmicks. And I haven't
watched Newsnight in a lot of years. I basically stopped watching Newsnight when Jeremy Paxman left. And that was what, 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't particularly like it. Its viewing figures have plummeted as well. I mean, it doesn't do very well. But at the same time, there's a range of alternatives if you want to watch news, isn't there? I mean, you can turn on Sky News. You've got GB News now. If you want to get your news from Russian sources, there is RT. Not that I do. In fact, the Freedom Association decided many years ago that we would not do interviews with RT or Press TV. We're not going to help legitimize those particular regimes. But there are various choices. Times Radio now does a newspaper review. There's various radio stations with a big news agenda. LBC, Talk Radio, the two main ones now. And if you want to listen to a really good sort of panel discussion program, not quite based on Question Time, but something similar, then you could listen to Ian Dale's show when he does Cross Question, which I think is a far more civilized way of doing it.
Do you think, therefore, part of it is obviously more competition, but do you think part of it is also deterioration is because some of that competition is what you would call perhaps BBC like? It has a similar style to the BBC and how it does things.
Well, I don't think Ian Dale's show does. I don't think Cross Question.
No, I mean, Times Radio.
Times Radio, yeah. Times Radio is very much the sort of the establishment. New kid on the block, I have to admit. I can take it or leave it when it comes to Times Radio, to be perfectly honest. But I think Ian Dale's Cross Question, I mean, show in general, but I mean, his Cross Question part of it, which is now 4 days a week, 3 or 4 days a week. It's a different format to the BBC Question Time format. Obviously, you get listeners phoning in with their questions and asking, but it just seems to be a far more civilized way of doing it. I think it's better because it doesn't have a live audience.
No, yeah.
I think that's probably one of the reasons why it is better. And of course, a lot of these shows do some very good public service broadcasting. They will campaign. I was listening to Talk Radio on the car a little bit earlier this morning, and it looks like they're going to be starting a little bit of a campaign against the energy companies who want to jack up our energy costs, by up to 50%. Looking at things like that, Ian Dale's done a lot on mental health issues on his show. There's a lot of good public service broadcasting on what you would call commercial stations. And GB News is also moving into this, and Sky's done a lot of that over the years. So, this idea that the BBC is the only public service broadcaster in this country, other than Channel 4, which is still technically a public service broadcaster, but I don't think it quite fits the remit to me. But the idea that the BBC is just it is the public service broadcaster of this country is simply not true. Commercial operations have proved that you can have a big public service input into what you're doing and still be very successful because it's what people are interested in.
Is there anything in the BBC that you, in its news and current affairs output, that you think there's still something to admire about it? There's still something things it produces that you think are outstanding or particularly good?
Well, of course, the size of the organisation helps it in some ways. It hinders it in others, but it does help. And one of the big things when it comes to news and current affairs is the amount of correspondence that they have around the world. You have to be a huge news organisation, something like Reuters, Press Association, huge organisations to be able to have that sheer amount of reporters around the world. Now, of course, that it's a two-edged sword. You can. I got this one actually when I interviewed Mike Graham, who's on Talk Radio, and he said it's all right having all these people around the world. He said, but sometimes you phone up and you say, well, what's happening in Kenya today then? Well, nothing really. It's all very well. We won't go to our Nairobi correspondent then, right? Right. Let's see what's happening. What's happening in Singapore? So again, nothing's happening. Right. Okay. Yeah. What's happening in Japan? Well, it's all very quiet, really. Yeah, since the Olympics, it's just gone really quiet. Oh, right. Well, there's no point in interviewing the person from Tokyo then. So you can have all these correspondents around the world, but unless you actually have news, then of course you could never go to them. But the flip side of that, of course, is if something major is happening in a part of the world, then the BBC can get someone there very quickly on the ground and can report on it. And that is a huge benefit that the BBC has.
I mean, it reminds me of, I don't know, it's one of the very last interviews John Lennon gave before he was killed, where he was interviewed by BBC Radio 1 just 2 days before. And about an hour in, he just thinks the only time you hear him mention Margaret Thatcher publicly, Lennon goes into a slight diatribe about Margaret Thatcher because he had read somewhere that she was planning on defunding the BBC World Service. And then he goes into a huge defence of the BBC World Service, saying that it's something where a lot of people find out what's going on in the UK, across the world, and find out places in the world. They learn a lot, and they learn a lot of knowledge and learn a lot of foresight and educate that they probably wouldn't elsewhere. So do you think there's been a deterioration in that area as well?
Yeah, I mean, to the best of my recollection, it may have changed now, but BBC World Service was largely funded through the Foreign Office. It wasn't funded through the BBC licence fee. And traditionally, because it's seen as a part of British foreign policy, as part of our soft power. And yes, I mean, you come across people who speak perfect English. And how did you learn that perfect English? You live in the Far East somewhere. Well, it was through listening to the BBC World Service. And yes, the BBC World Service is vitally important. But of course, it's not something that we. I mean, when was the last time you listened to it? I'll phrase it that way. When was the last time that you listened to the BBC World Service?
Well, the BBC World Service is usually on mainstream radio, when it has been in the early hours of the morning. So I think the last time I would have listened to it was some years before, when I was up at a godforsaken hour for some particular reason, where I had
to. And you could get it online as well. I mean, it's possible.
Oh yeah, there is that. There is that. But I mean, that goes.
But the fact is, we don't listen to it.
No,
I do agree it's vitally important. I think it is part of our soft power as a country.
Yes.
But of course, we domestically in the UK do not listen to the BBC World Service as a general rule. I bet there's just a few thousand people in the UK will have probably listened to the BBC World Service in the last week. It will be in the thousands. So, but I do agree that is a vitally important part of the BBC's work.
But that goes back to there being more competition, I think, in some way. Mm-hmm. There's less, we've got more variety. And I mean, that's not, I think that's not so much whether the government's allowed more competition. I don't think it's even a left-right thing. I think it's simply the fact that we've got more resources and more technology, such as the internet, which means that we will inevitably have more. I mean, I can watch. I remember with the whole Trump debacle after he lost in last year, I would sometimes be able to watch whole programs on NBC or CNN through their official YouTube sites, because, about what was going on. I mean, I'm not just talking about the sound bites of 5 minutes, the whole half-hour programs. So
yeah, I've watched CBS before. I mean, during the time, during the election time, and I was after some more information, and I've watched CBS on YouTube, and just watched entire programs as they are live. Going out in America. No, that's true. Look, I think when we talk about the BBC, we're looking between left and right and biases here, institutional biases. That's one thing. But then you have deliberate misinformation, and there's plenty of countries around the world that are masters of propaganda and deliberate misinformation. We know those countries. We know the main culprits. They're China and Russia at the moment. So we know they're there. So even though you may be able to get news from multiple sources, you can watch things online. You can pick up literally every radio station just about in the world, can't you? Online, if you find them. I do think that the BBC World Service, as by and large a generally impartial service, is probably more important than ever in certain parts around the world. Because if you live in China, you probably get you will get the BBC World Service blocked. But if you're living in other parts of the Far East, you want to know what's going on in China, you're going to find out what's going on in China from the BBC, not from Chinese broadcasters. And the same goes with Russia. So I think it does play that vitally important role. We're not just talking about biases here, we're talking about deliberate misinformation, and the BBC will put the record straight. And that, I go back to what I was saying before, that's the advantage of having so many different correspondents around the world who can easily be there.
So what do you think, let's imagine in an alternative universe, you went through the ranks of journalism and and corporate management, and you were today made the new Director General of the BBC. What would you do to restore trust in areas which you think were lacking, and how would you make the BBC the channel you think it ought to be, the television broadcast do you think it ought to be?
Well, you know that old Irish saying, you know, can you tell me the way to Dublin, please? Well, if I was going to Dublin, I wouldn't be starting here. It's a little bit like that, really, because I have every sympathy with Tim Davie to a certain extent. And when I was trying to get a BBC representative onto a webinar that I was doing earlier this year, he actually intervened personally to try and help, which I thought was, you know, I couldn't imagine if that help would have been forthcoming from any other BBC director general. But I just think that the BBC as it stands now, this huge monolith funded by the license fee, it's just not going to last. It just can't last. It's an unsustainable model. I think you have to look at the parts of the BBC that are genuinely genuinely public service orientated. Can the market provide these things? And if they can they provide it anywhere near as well? And look at those particular things. And then the rest really should be commercialized. I mean, let's go through the radio channels. Everyone goes through TV. Let's go through the radios. We don't often hear a radio a lot in these type of discussions. You know, Radio 1 generally plays the music that a lot of commercial radio stations already play. Now, some people who defend Radio 1 will say, yes, but they nurture new talent. And that's an important part of what the BBC does. Yes, but lots of different organisations could do that. Radio 2, it's an eclectic mix of just about anything and everything. And radio people who I know who've been involved in setting up commercial radio stations for specific niche interests have said they can't do it because Radio 2 beats them all the time. It's so eclectic that it actually just pushes out competition from all sorts of different areas, be it in folk music, country music, jazz, other areas. Radio 3 is a genuine public service broadcaster. There's nothing like Radio 3. The likes of Scala, the likes of Classic FM do not come anywhere near competing with what actually Radio 3 does. So I accept that. Radio 4, yes, that can be seen as a genuine public service broadcasting channel. Although I will say that with podcasting in particular, you can find various niche interests and hear interviews that will interest you about a variety of subjects. So they're already there. But no, I know you screw your face up a little bit. You're allowed to do it. But I have said it is a public service broadcast.
It is, but the thing I think the thing is, I'm one of those who, you know how it is with people who listen to Radio 4. It's like, don't touch it with a barge pole. But one of the things I love
about it for it yourself, then. I don't listen to it.
I do. I do, as just about every other citizen in the UK who pays their taxes. But the thing is,
no, but I have to pay for it. I don't watch it. I listen to it rather.
Yeah, but it does have a variety of Radio 4. But I don't think there's anything like the sheer variety that you get on one news on one radio program, say on a Saturday morning and early afternoon. I think it's just about the only one where I find interesting. If I'm at work on Saturday, I have Radio 4 in the background if I can help it, because there's such an eclectic mix. You've got the Today programme, which is always interesting, even when it's pretty awful. You've got the Saturday Live with Shamir Ahmed and Reverend Richard Coles, which is always worth a listen to, I think. You've also got programmes like the Westminster Hour for our own correspondent, where you do hear interesting stories from the world. You've got the I've forgotten the name, the not money program, the the financial program, whose name I've forgotten. Moneybox, that's it. You've got Moneybox, and then you've got some, whether it's the Now Show or Dead Ringers or something, you've got some satirical political satire or some news quiz or the news quiz or something like that at 12:30. And then after the news, you've got Any Questions. And I think if you've got a certain mindset like me, that is, and yet there's a variety there, that is a very ideal Saturday morning. I think the only thing that's missing from that lineup is an episode of The Archers and Test Match Special.
Yes. Well, yes. Although I listened to Test Match Special on Radio 5 Extra.
Well, yeah.
Because it's a much better signal, obviously, and also we do, as wonderful as it is to listen to the shipping forecast, as I have done all over these years, it's rather nice not to have it when you try to listen to the commentary. But all right, don't say that I don't give ground. I'm giving ground to you on this one. I do see your point. That was a good defence of radio for certainly on a Saturday morning. I think the sport on full there as well, isn't it? Where you get various. And it just and the one thing about some of those bulletins, it just doesn't concentrate on football, which I don't particularly like. It does go around all sorts of different sports. Because I think with some sort of sports bulletins that you get on some broadcasters, it may as well be the football bulletin rather than the sports bulletin.
So you didn't see the European Cup matches this last month?
I did watch about the last half an hour of England's quarter-final, and then I say watch. It was on my television, the semi-final and the final. I mean, eventually the final got gripping, because I knew when it came to penalties we'd lose. But yeah, I started to watch it then. But that's more to do with England. It's really got nothing to do with football. I probably support England in the World Tiddlywinks Championship. Not that I've got interest in tiddlywinks. So it's that sort of thing. I mean, I love cricket. I mean. I'm looking forward to. Looking forward to the second Test match tomorrow, but probably not actually. So we better move off that subject.
Well, I was going to say I did think the BBC commentary was better than the ITV commentary, which seemed to be the.
Oh yes, well that's generally true about most things to do with sport and also major events. You tend to find that the BBC on major events such as big funerals, weddings, big state occasions, that the BBC commentary tends to be better than ITV.
Well, I think we've covered what we can cover on this. I think we obviously, as I hoped and anticipated, we have areas of agreement and areas of disagreement. I would argue that I think the BBC ought to. It's a case of root and branch reform of the BBC is needed. You probably think differently, but I can't see us sort of agreeing perhaps on the remedies anytime soon.
No, I mean, I just want a good mix of broadcasting.
Yeah.
In the UK, and I don't mean to race to the bottom. I think we may have discussed this before when we were discussing things to do with America. But my goodness me, you put on American television, it's dire, it's tripe. It's just not good at all. And I certainly don't want to see your British television go as bad as American television. You put on their news shows even, and there's no real in-depth code. I don't know what you found. I mean, you said you were looking at on YouTube. It's the likes of I think CBS and NBC. Yeah. There isn't a lot of those really good in-depth discussions on certain subjects. They tend to flick from one to the other very quickly.
There is, and there does seem to be a sort of certain bias. I would say, no, I would blame. I think that's partly. I mean, I would blame Fox News first and foremost in that, but it does exist in other news channels. But I would argue that what's going on in the United States is so unusual and so unique, and so much is at stake. I would cut NBC and CBS and CNN a lot of slack where I otherwise wouldn't, because we're dealing with Trump.
Well, yeah, I know. Maybe, but I mean, for example, on MSNBC, it used to be. He doesn't do it anymore now. It's Chris Matthews. He used to do Hardball, and the only reason I sort of tuned into that is because I actually read a book that he wrote about Tip O'Neill and President Reagan's relationship, which so I sort of checked him out a little bit, and that's how I sort of found out. And I just couldn't watch the programs because it was this sort of typical over-the-top American style, where people seem to have taken drugs or something before they start presenting, and they're hyper and they're jumping about and they try to shout into the camera. And then, 2 minutes later, quite literally 2 minutes later, they go off to an advert, and then they come back and they'll cover this next subject for about 2 minutes. Then they'll go and do something else for 2 minutes. Then they'll go to an advert, and I'm thinking, well, I just can't keep up with this. Where's that sort of 10-minute segment gone? I mean, people often complain, the 10 minutes is not enough to do a proper interview. And I tend to agree with that. It isn't. But by God, it's better than what you get in the United States. It's far better than what you get.
Yeah. I just wonder whether I think the fear people always have when they're against a more open market is they fear it'll be just like America.
Oh, I think the fact we've got quite a broad market now for news and speech radio stations, and I don't think it is going like America. I really don't. Some are more tabloidy than others. People would accuse talk radio of being more tabloidy. I mean, sometimes I can take it or leave it. I do listen to it quite a lot, and I tend to be a guest on one of the shows about once a week as well. So I'm not going to say, I wouldn't say anything bad about it because I genuinely do listen to it. But there's still the times when I want to listen to shows like Ian Dale's on LBC, and we'll quite happily tune into that. I think Colin Brazier now on Sky News, on GB News rather, is absolutely brilliant. I like that. They've rejigged their daytime lineup as well. We'll see how things go, but I think there's something there for everyone without turning it into too American. I mean, even Sky News now, Sky News and GB News, they will go to adverts about every quarter of an hour, won't they?
Yeah,
it's not like America.
No, it reminds me. I mean, just for a time, it reminds me of my maternal granddad who got satellite television in his mid-80s. And this is someone who was 9 years old when World War One broke out, and he could remember the German Zeppelin flying over Grantham. And so I went in and I saw the channels, and of course I saw, obviously it's about 27 years ago. I could see 1 2 American news channels, so I was quite interested. And I said, "Have you seen CNN?" I said to my granddad, "Yeah, I've seen it." "Well, what did you think?" "Well, I didn't watch it. It was all American."
Well, I think it was George Bernard Shaw who I can't remember the quote in full, but he described the United Kingdom and the United States as countries with similar values. So, and he went through a whole list of things. He said, divided in one thing, the same language that we speak.
Yeah.
And it's true in the way that they use the English language. It's true in the way that they express themselves. You're either a fan of it or you're not really.
Yeah, that's true. Well, time is pressing, but thank you so much for the conversation. Hopefully we've put some of the world to rights, or the BBC, and I hope you have a good week.
Yes, and a good rest of the month. Enjoy the rest of the summer.
Yes, indeed. It is passing quickly. Well, have a good time. Cheers. Thank
you.